This episode of MoneyWeek Talks is brought to you by Lion Trust. Lion Trust is an investment manager that believes in the power of being actively different.
If we think caring, bringing up children and so on is a really valuable, important thing, we shouldn't take away the bit of the system that actually protects that. Because a year bringing up children gives you as much state pension as a year running a FTSE 100 company. We value those two things the same.
Hello, I'm Kalpana Fitzpatrick, digital editor of MoneyWeek. Welcome to this episode of MoneyWeek Talks. MoneyWeek's motto is to make it, keep it, spend it. And in each episode, we help you do just that with our top guests who come with incredible insight and views that will help you shape your finances. Whether you're looking for the latest trends, want to make sense of the markets, make more money, or just want to understand the world of investing better, then this is for you. In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Sir Steve Webb. Steve was appointed as Pensions Minister in 2010 and served under the Lib Dem Conservative government. Today, he is partner at consulting firm LCP, where he continues to campaign around pension policies and inequalities. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure sharing a platform with you. So thank you for joining me in the studio. I just mentioned the word inequalities, and let's face it, the world is pretty unequal for today's generation compared to baby boomers, Gen X, and even millennials to some extent. Now, this generation has gold-plated pensions with defined benefit pension plans, and many are homeowners. Gen Z are fairly jealous. They can't get onto the property ladder, and they may not even bother with a pension. But for those who do, you recently wrote a piece in a national paper saying they should be allowed to use their pension to fund a deposit for a house. Tell me a bit more about this.
Yeah, sure. Controversial view in the pensions world.
It is.
I guess my starting point is when we think about retirement, traditionally we've thought about that as a time when, as you said, you own a home and you've paid off your mortgage. So that big, heavy burden has gone and you can enjoy your retirement. That's a big outgoing you no longer have. But what we're starting to see is growing numbers of people who are going to enter retirement as renters. And that is, not to put too fine a point on it, catastrophic for your finances. Because you don't just have to pay all your bills, your council tax, your energy bills, all that kind of stuff. You've got to find the money for a rent on top. Well, most people aren't saving enough just for basic bills. Stick a rent on top and you've got virtually no chance of a decent retirement. So for me, not having to pay a rent in retirement is good retirement planning. So what does that mean? That means if you can afford to buy a house and can get to retirement not having a house, not having a rent to pay, then even if your pension's a bit smaller than it would have been, overall you're still potentially a lot better off. Compare that, for example, with renting in your 30s and 40s and 50s and all that kind of dead money. If that money is actually going into giving you a house with some equity and taking a cost away in retirement, we should think very carefully before saying to people, oh no, pension's the only thing that matters in saving, leave it alone.
I see what you're saying. I do believe we have this culture in the UK, very, very much so in the UK, where it's not good to rent at all. And I personally do believe it is okay to rent, especially while you're young, because it gives you flexibility. You want to stop working in London, maybe you want to move to Manchester. You can do that quite easily, whereas if you're tied to a property, you lose that flexibility. So another question, I guess, to add to that is inadequate savings. Now, we see endless reports about people simply not saving enough for retirement. And we also always say, start young and let compounding do its magic, and don't be afraid to start saving for a pension in your 20s. It's the best time to start saving for one. Now, there is a lot of fear and anxiety around whether people will be able to afford a comfortable retirement. What would you say to people if they feel like they haven't saved enough? What's the general tips around that?
Yeah. As well as starting young, I always say to people it's never too late to start, because when you put money in a pension, often it's a workplace pension, so you're immediately getting money from the government, you're getting a tax break on the way in, you can take a quarter tax free on the way out. So even if it's only a few £1,000s, that's better than nothing. It could pay a bill, it could replace something that broke down. So even starting late, I think, is worth doing. maxing out on what your employer will do, because many employers will do more than the legal minimum. And if you go a bit further, they'll go a bit further. And, it's funny, we read about different ways of investing and the returns you can get. But if you can take £1 and make it £2 overnight because your employer's put £1 in as well, tell me where you're going to beat that. So, pension can be a very good way of saving, but they aren't the only way. And I think you do need short-term savings. So I think everybody should ideally have a cash buffer for unexpected items. I mean, I do some debt advice in my spare time, and the number of people I meet who, if they just had a bit of cash to deal with an unexpected item, they'd never have got into debt problems. So short-term saving and a house. It seems to me that we fetishize almost pensions. We obsess about pensions as though they're the only thing that matter. But actually not having to pay a rent is incredibly important. Not because I think renting's bad. I, like many people, rented after I started work, bought a house a bit later. But having to pay a rent in retirement means the pot size you need is probably double. And that means most people won't be able to achieve that. And the other thing is going with the grain. If you say to a young person, stick your money in this thing you can't touch till you're 58 or 60 or whatever, as against put your money into this product, and actually, as well as helping you when you're older, it'll help you now with buying a house. That's much more attractive, so they may save more.
Yeah. I guess another problem that we're facing today as well is I don't think the cost of living crisis is quite over, and people are still worried about expenses. And one of the things that a lot of people say to me actually is, I've just paused on my pension contributions. What would you say about people who do that? Because I don't believe they should. It's not like, you stop now and you pick up where you left from. It's quite damaging.
It's always tempting, isn't it, really? If money's really, really tight, what can you stop doing that you don't have to do? How about the pension? I think one of the interesting things about automatic enrolment that we established is you have something called automatic re-enrolment. So if you drop out 3 years on, they put you back in again, and you have to keep opting out if you want to. So that helps to nudge people back in. Of course, when you opt out, and one group who opt out are often young public sector workers, so nurses, teachers and so on. And when they opt out, they are giving away a colossal amount of money from their employer that they just never get. It's not like it goes somewhere else, it goes in their wage. They just never get it. So I think giving up the money your employer is putting in is a bit invisible, but can be really very valuable as well. So yes, there are times when you just absolutely have to meet your immediate needs, but trying to find other savings first if you can, I think, is always the advisable thing to do, things that you can economise on.
And that's where you're talking about having like a little pot of short-term savings that you can overcome any financial difficulty should you face any.
Yeah, and I like the idea of bolting that onto the pension. So there's this phrase you sometimes hear of sidecar savings.
Yeah.
So this is the idea: you have a pension pot and you're also putting money into this cash pot. And if you then need it for emergencies and short-term needs, you spend it. But if you don't, it builds up and builds up. And then when it reaches a certain level, it kind of overflows into your pension. And Nest have tried this and it's worked pretty well. And the government's just set up a pensions commission. And one of the things they're going to look at is whether the pension itself should be different, maybe have these cash pots on the side. And I'd be in favour of that.
Great, sounds great. So there's another policy people may consider unfair. You know what I'm going to say. It's the triple lock. Now, this was introduced by the Lib Dem Conservative Coalition government and implemented while you were Pensions Minister.
Yep.
We've recently had figures around the costs from the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility, that it will cost the government $15.5 billion by 2030. How do you feel about the triple lock today? And do you think it should stay? Or should we have a means-tested state pension system? So many questions there, so many big questions.
So it's worth just thinking about what the triple lock is and why it was brought in. So I became Pensions Minister in 2010. The previous 30 years, the pension had been falling in value. The state pension had been falling in value relative to what people earn. So it just went up with inflation every year most of the time. And the problem with that is if you earn, stop earning, then the thing that you fall onto when you've stopped earning needs to be connected to what you were earning. It needs to be some proportion of what you were earning. Otherwise, you just fall off a cliff. Your standard of living crashes. So we need to peg the pension to kind of what a proportion of what people are earning. For 30 years, that hadn't happened. So the pension was getting worse and worse and worse relative to what people were used to before they retired. So the point of more generous indexation post-2010 was to try and undo 30 years of damage. Not 5 years, 30 years of damage. And that's why here we are 15 years on. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed. Actually, I'm proud of the fact that the state pension has been over-indexed. So we link it now to the best of the growth in wages, the growth in prices, or 2.5%. And what that's done is nudged up the state pension a bit relative to the average wage. It's still low by international standards. It's still a big slump if that's all you've got in retirement and you were on an average wage, but it's better than it was. Now, I don't think it will go on forever. People do reports saying, well, if we do this till 2070, we spend all our money on pensions. I don't think we go to 2070, but it's there to do a job. Now, you mentioned fairness, and the argument runs, this is a sop to the grey vote. It's all about older people. Young people shouldn't have to pay for all of this. But a few minutes ago, you told me all these young people aren't saving enough for their retirement. They need a good state pension, don't they? So actually, if we take our foot off the gas on the state pension now, my kids who are in their 20s, who may have inadequate private pensions, really, really need a good state pension. So I don't think we do young people a favour by saying, well, we can't afford a good state pension, we're easing off on that. We're not going to make you save enough into a private pension. Work till you drop because you can't afford to retire.
Yeah.
That's not good either.
Is the state pension, however, ever going to be enough? Because shouldn't we be encouraging people to actually have a private pension, not rely on the state full stop? Should we not be aiming for that? Or should there be a bit of both? But I just don't think, to me, the message should never be the state will provide for you, because it's just never going to be enough. And what I was talking about, like people not saving enough for retirement, yes, but I think is the message more so, work on your private pension. That's what you really need to focus on, and almost forget about the state pension.
I don't know, forget about it. I mean, it is a major part of the retirement income of the majority of today's pensioners, particularly women, who on average, as you know, tend to have smaller private pension pots. So again, if you ease off on the state pension, proportionally you're disadvantaging women more than men, because men are more likely to have something else. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of think about all these dimensions of equality. My view would be, of course you want a good private pension. The state pension is about £12,000 a year at the moment. The average wage, depends how you measure it, is more like 30,000 or so, depends where you live and on full-time and all the rest of it. But let's say 30,000. Nobody wants to drop from 30 to 12. Mm-hmm. So already we're saying you kind of need, this is a partnership. The state will get you to the start line. It will make sure you don't starve. It will make sure you can pay your basic bills a bit, as you were saying. You won't be able to go on 3 foreign holidays a year and whatever. It'll cover the basics, but no more. Most people want more, therefore private pensions and encouragement. So I don't think it's either or, I think it's a partnership. I guess the other thing I'd say is there's lots of people who will never be able to afford to save for a good private pension. Carers, people bringing up children, people looking after disabled people, people who are too sick to work and so on. So the state is going to have to support them in retirement anyway. So let's do it universally, systematically, rather than have them have to come and claim a means test at retirement and everybody else is fine. But, if we think caring, bringing up children and so on is a really valuable, important thing, we shouldn't take away the bit of the system that actually protects that. Because a year bringing up children gives you as much state pension as a year running a FTSE 100 company. We value those two things the same, and rightly so in my view. You degrade the state pension, you take that away.
That's really interesting. I love what you're saying about the triple look. I can see why. So now I'm going to move on to when you were pensions minister. Now you're already aware of this. You were one of the longest serving pensions ministers of all time. So since 1998, there have been 18 pension ministers and 5 since you stopped working. I can't figure out why no one wants the job. So you managed to stay put for 1,823 days, second to Guy Opperman, who managed 1,913 days. So, thank you. The shortest serving pensions minister was Alex Burghardt at 38 days.
That's a good Trivial Pursuits question, isn't it?
It is. 38 days.
I know. I met him in those 38 days.
Did you? Why doesn't anyone want to stay in that role? Can't figure it out. But I've been writing about pensions for many years, as you know, and I'm constantly like looking at new pension ministers, and I can't, like I said, I can't figure out why they don't want to say it. But we're glad you stayed, because you have not stopped talking about pensions since. It's still very much, at the centre of what you do. But if you were pensions minister today, what policies would you introduce and which ones would you remove? And I'll just add on to that. And we've talked about injustices that you're always flagging, like WASPI, state pension errors. How would you help tackle these injustices? So a few questions in there, sorry again.
No.
But so maybe if we start with, what would you do as pensions minister today?
I mean, the single biggest problem is what we've been talking about, is too many people simply not building up pension pots of their own quickly enough. That pensions ministers get asked to deal with 1,000 things. And one of the wisest words I was ever given by one of my civil servants, he said, Minister, because that's what they say, Minister, he said, keep the main thing the main thing. It's so tempting to be distracted, or you read a newspaper headline, or someone you meet at an event and you get, what is the single biggest problem we've got? It's simply that there isn't enough money going in. Now, in my time, we did automatic enrolment, so that meant another 10 million people having something. Great. We stepped up the contributions from 2% to 5% to 8% gradually to phase it all in. Great. And then that will have been stuck for about a decade. So we got to 8% by 2019. This government said more contributions are not going to happen in this parliament, so that takes 2029. So we'll have a wasted decade. So when I arrive into power after the next election, Lord Webb of somewhere or other, appointed by the Lib Dem Prime Minister or whatever, the first thing I do is set a timetable for getting those contributions going again. I think you have to start with employers, because at the moment, as you know, the mandatory contribution is 5% from the worker and 3% from the firm. That just doesn't seem right to me. I think it should be equal. Most of the world, it would be actually the employer probably doing more. So we're a bit of an outlier there. So I'd start to edge up what the employer puts in, probably then raise the combined contribution, but then have this kind of cash sidecar idea, so that we're not locking people's money up, so the lower paid cost of living crisis folk can get it back if they need it. But, there are so many other things. There's a big pension schemes bill going through Parliament at the moment that runs to dozens and dozens of pages. Nothing in that bill is as important as what I've just said.
Wow.
So that's what I would do. What I wouldn't do, I am worried about inheritance tax and pensions. I understand the argument that says you've got money in an ISA, you pay inheritance tax. You've got money in a pension, you don't. I kind of see why that seems a bit odd. And pensions are being used as a bit to avoid inheritance tax. My worry is what's going to happen post-2027 is, so I've done probate twice in the last year, so I've been through this process. They call it SADMIN, the whole hassle of, someone's died, you've got to deal with all the paperwork. Once pensions are in, your let's say your parent has died, so your widowed mother, she dies, you've got to deal with her estate. First thing you have to do is find all her pensions, contact all the pension companies, get values back, value all the rest of the estate, put it on an HMRC calculator, get figures back, write back to all the pension companies telling them how much IHT needs to be paid, and so on and so on. The hassle, the admin, the delay, all that's going to cause is just going to be misery for people who may, at the end of all that, not have to pay any inheritance tax, because you don't know you don't have to pay inheritance tax till you've been through all the hoops.
Yeah.
And I'm just really worried. It's rough enough as it is for people when someone dies emotionally and all the bureaucracy. Stick pensions on top. Add that to the delay in getting probate and all that sort of stuff. I just feel they haven't thought enough about the human side of all of that.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I think there's a lot of admin involved when someone passes away, as it is. So it's also, I think it's really off-putting for pension savings. I just think the message around pensions, I think there isn't enough trust, and there's a lot of anxiety around pensions. I hear a lot of people just saying, "Why bother with a pension?" I think this really adds to it, and it's not a good. It doesn't seem like a good messaging. But I'd never really thought about also the additional admin and the burden that people have to then face, and it does seem a bit wrong in that sense.
I mean, I deal a lot with the general public, people, my mobile phone number's all over the internet for my sins, and so people just literally, someone just rang me up yesterday and said, I've got a pension question, Mr. Webb, etc. And one of the things I find is people get really frustrated trying to get answers out of the government about their pensions, but also often about pension companies. So to give you one example, the teachers' pension scheme was just so far behind with paperwork that couples who were divorcing, their divorce was on hold for a year because they couldn't get a pension quote.
Yeah.
And so imagine someone's just died, you're contacting all the pension companies, and one of them doesn't reply. So what do you do then? You have to chase them and hassle them, and they've got some press 17 if you want this option button thing, and then you get an automated thing that tells you they've cut you off. And people who've just been bereaved, who might themselves be elderly and vulnerable, are going to have to jump through all these hoops, and that just bothers me.
Doesn't seem right. No. Doesn't feel right at all. Thank you. The injustices, you've been speaking to us quite a lot actually about all the state pension errors. There's a lot of them, and also WASPI. And I just want to know how would you tackle that as a pensions minister today, if you were one?
Yeah, I think so. With WASPI, so the issue, the argument was that a group of women had their state pension age increase, didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. Found out often at very short notice and lost out as a result. Now, I think I've always said pension ages did need to go up. I don't apologise for that fact. I think that was essential. Men's state pension age was unchanged for a century.
Wow.
Think about the last 100 years and all the changes in life expectancy and health and the jobs we do and the fact fewer of us smoke and all that stuff. And yet the male pension age was due to be 65 in the early 2020s, as it was in the early 1920s. So pension ages do have to go up, but obviously people need to know about it. So to the extent that when I was a minister and we put pension ages up a bit faster and a bit further, we then sent, I think the figure was 5 million letters. So when the Ombudsman looked into all of this, they looked into the early changes, which the WASPI campaign was really about. They looked into the changes we did and they put an appendix and they listed all the letters we sent. And you'll hear a WASPI campaigner say, well, I never got a letter. Well, maybe they didn't. But,
I do.
But we sent 5 million out, and I know we did because I got a hell of a lot of replies to them. So I know the letters happen kind of thing. I'm not saying perfectly everybody. So I think what the Ombudsman said was, look, it's up to Parliament to set pension ages. So he never, or she now, never recommended giving the women the money back. That was never the recommendation. Yeah. What the Ombudsman said is there should be compensation for the fact that a significant number of people didn't know, weren't told in time. Some of them made poor decisions that they wouldn't have made if they'd known. And I think if you have an ombudsman system, you should honour that. So I don't think you should just pay anyone whose pension was 65, not 60, give them 50,000 quid. I don't think you should do that. I couldn't afford to do that. But I do think if the Ombudsman says at least there should be some recognition and some compensation for what they call distress and inconvenience, basically, that should be honoured. So if I were the minister, I'd be pressing the Treasury to find the money to do what the Ombudsman, or at least some of what the Ombudsman recommended. Yeah.
Well, they haven't given up there.
No, there's always another court case.
They have not given up. There's always something. Yeah. And I think it's amazing that you're continuing to tackle all the injustices that are still lingering. And finally, now this is been a bit of a debate in our MoneyWeek HQ about should 16-year-olds be allowed to vote. Now, I will personally say no, because I just don't think they're there yet. But do they know enough about pensions or other policies that impact their finances to hold that level of power? I'm just really interested in what you think.
Yeah, sure. I think if the test was, do you know enough about pensions, most of the British public wouldn't be allowed to vote, to be honest. I suppose, there's that slogan from probably a few hundred years ago, no taxation without representation. We tax 16-year-olds.
Fair enough.
They can go out and work, they can pay tax, national insurance, I think. They can buy stuff that VAT is levied on. If they motorists at 17 and they pay petrol, there's duty on petrol. They might shockingly smoke and pay duty on that, and so on. So they are paying into the system. When I talk to sixth form groups, I say, put your hand up if you're a taxpayer. And of course, all the teachers put their hand up, and none of the kids do. And I say, no, you are all taxpayers. So if you are a taxpayer, in my view, why shouldn't you be able to vote? Now, you could argue that about 15-year-olds because they probably pay tax as well. But, I think 16 is as good an age as any. Lots of people, frankly, who are much, much older, haven't got a clue. Lots of people, of course, could vote and don't, which is shocking, but that's the world we live in. So I think if 16-year-olds want to engage, and, I used to really enjoy going as an MP to talk to sixth forms, and you'd have fantastic quality of discussion. Now, of course, people vary. That's not true of everyone, but lots of them were interested. Lots of them have got good questions. Lots of them are kind of socially aware. So, in my view, why not?
That's a really good balanced argument. I'm still split-minded on this, I have to say. But I'll think about that. Great. Now.
Votes at 16 and the triple lock, Kalpana. Can I have both?
Maybe. Maybe. I'm a hard one to convince. But now for the fun part. Actually, this has all been fun. So this is an extra fun part.
How dare you? How very dare you?
So I ask all the guests that come on to MoneyWeek Talks 3 fun questions. And appreciate I haven't given you much time to think about these. So we'll just go in and let's see what you say. So if I gave you 5,000 now, what would you do with it?
Wow. You're going to hate me for saying this. I mean, I support a lot of charities. And because I have a good job and I have everything I need, I try and do that as actively as I can. And recently I was involved in a fundraiser for a small children's hospice charity that I support called the Jessie May Trust near Bristol. They had a sort of 48-hour fundraiser, and all the supporters got together, and every time someone, supported, you got an alert, and we had this great kind of fundraising effort. And it raised a good chunk of money for the charity. And so even to someone like me, £5,000, obviously at one level is a lot of money, but it's not like it would be to someone on benefit kind of thing. So I could give that money to that charity, and it would really make their day, because nobody else would have given them £5,000 that day. A keen local supporter might have done a sponsorship and raised 150 quid kind of thing, and that's fantastic, and we need that. But to actually be able to help charities with much more significant sums. So it's a bit of a pious answer, I'm afraid, but that is probably what I would do. So.
That's lovely. I think that's lovely and really nice to hear. Question number 2. Your life is about to become a movie. Movie about a former pensions minister. This could be an exciting movie.
It's a horror movie.
Who would play you?
Goodness me. I suppose someone who might be a little bit like me would be someone a little bit geeky, dare I say it. So maybe someone like Richard Osman. He's not an actor, but he's a writer and all the rest of it. And he's also probably about 2 foot taller than me. But that aside, because he's kind of witty and smart and a little bit nerdy, but actually very successful and so on. And so I think and people like him.
Nice.
So I think I'd take that. There you go.
Nice, like it. Look forward to the movie.
Quite.
So, and finally, if you could make something petty into law, what would it be?
Gosh.
So something petty.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I'm not very on message as a Lib Dem, but there is something the Lib Dems have said recently that resonated, which is when you're on a train and people play their stuff out loud, it just drives me mad. And mostly I'm on kind of businessy type journeys, and everyone else got their head down and their laptop out, but particularly on a weekend or whatever, and people have got, I try not to be too Victor Meldrew about this. If you've got kids and it's just keeping the kids amused, then fair enough. But when you've just got an adult who could stick an earphone in and doesn't, I'm a bit worried now, because this is the most passionate I've been in the entire conversation.
You've been passionate about pictures, don't you worry.
Phew. So I think I'd probably lock them up.
Well, I'll let you into a secret. You're not the first guest to say that.
Oh, really? Oh, well, there you go.
We say this every day, in fact, as soon as we get into the office. Today, in fact. And I absolutely agree. I would love to see that become a law. Headphones in, please. Thank you so much. As always, it's amazing speaking with you.
That's been fun. Thank you, Kalpana.
It's been great. Thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure.
Thank you.